Hi everybody, I'm Andy Bates. I'm the policy officer for the Labour Housing Group. For this in conversation, it's a pleasure to introduce Lewis Herbert, who's the leader of Cambridge City Council. So at a time when we're under loads of pressure in terms of delivery, making a practical difference to people's lives, particularly the people who are experiencing the greatest difficulty and stress. Lewis is very much the person of the moment in terms of talking to us. So I read that Lewis, you've delivered more council homes than anywhere else outside London. And when you think of the bigger firepower of the larger metropolitan authorities, that's a superb achievement. So hopefully tonight you'll tell us how you've achieved that, and you'll tell us the best way of spending the 39 million from the Social and Affordable Homes programme. For anybody for whom this is your first in conversation, the way we'll do this is Lewis will talk first, and as you can see, he's got a PowerPoint presentation. We've got a small group tonight, so we'll kind of have an informal discussion, ask great questions to improve the quality of the podcast. We tend to finish around 8 o'clock, but if we've still got a queue of questions, it's kind of a soft finish, and we'll go through till about 8:15. So having said all that, Lewis, I'll shut up and over to the person that people want to hear from tonight.
Well, thank you, Andy. And yeah, I think Labour Housing Group relies on volunteers, and look at all of the output you've got and all of what you're putting on at conference. So yeah, the backdrop for me is that we talk about soft launches. That's what we've had so far with the 39 billion programme. It's due to start next year. I probably didn't expect much of an announcement early on because Homes England's going through quite a transition, and a lot of this has to be done in detail. So as with yesterday, as we're talking at the beginning of September, and Keir saying it's got to be all about delivery, the promises on housing, including shifting Homes England from, I would say, a lost tribe going through a desert in terms of some of the way they've spent some of the money over the last 15 years, it really has to be well organised. So if we ain't got it in July, and we've got a conference coming up later in the month, I'm predicting, rightly or wrongly, that we're going to hear some of the shape of where that money is going to be spent. So what I'm going to cover is I'm going to have a look at that as a principle, but I'm going to start, I'm going to save you from my collection of 40 graphs of the last 50 years, but I have pulled out 10 that I think tell some of the story. And it's not a happy one, because Labour, after the Second War, in addition to all the other things that were initiated or achieved in that amazing government, it set a pattern for 40 years of delivery on housing, which transformed opportunities for people, particularly affordable rent. And so I'm going to look through some of the key graphs and the horrible state of homelessness, given that the comparison is that the homeless crisis is as bad as in several ways it was at the end of the war. I've also done a lot of research about the Second War, and this is a guy called Hector Murdoch returning to Tulse Hill. He didn't make it back early because he was a prisoner of the Japanese, so he didn't make it back till October. And that's the same for all of the soldiers that were fighting from Cambridgeshire, where over 2,000 were sent to Singapore. So you're talking about somebody who's had a horrible war, and the good luck was that he was able to return to a home. And these, you can see how quickly they were built, that this one was built by October 45. The war had only just about ended 80 years ago today, at the beginning of September. And there's different views, and clearly if we're going to talk about modular now, it's going to be very different to the prefabs. But when you look at the picture on the top right of Folkestone, oh, we're just going to build on that hill. And you look at the way that homes were literally built in two halves often, and then built what is called volumetric, which is when the modulars are actually assembled to final use in a factory and then carried on roads on a shape that can fit a lorry. When I was a GLC councillor a while ago, there were still quite a few of these prefabs in Catford. And on the bottom right, the point of that is that these just didn't just come as rooms. You literally had folding out tables designed and quite a lot of features built into them. So you got more than a home. So just briefly on the graphs, the spirit of political leadership, including the Blair government, including the current government to some extent, is about owner occupying. And in a good way, we've actually quashed an exploitative private rent domination that we had before Labour governments came in. And we, for a very strong period from the end of the war, were building social rent, low-cost homes. And it's probably my favourite graph in a way, including the version from 1945. I think I pinned it on my X account back in 2017. And it essentially tells a story that from 1945, particularly into the mid-70s, and there's a slight lag here in policy change because these are completions, and I have to say it was a Labour government that brought an end in fiscal rectitude in the mid-70s to some extent, although they didn't stick the boot in, as I'll come on to. But essentially, you've effectively for the last 40 years had a dominance coming on for 50 years of market housing and very little focus on the affordable. Then we come to this magic and the challenge to a Labour government, and I think we should all want to see where the beef is about how many homes are going to be delivered. These can be counted in different ways, but governments of all colour have rarely got to anywhere close to 300,000 homes in the last 50 years. And at the same time, because of the shortage of housing that's been built, that has particularly hurt people on lower incomes because there's been less of the affordable rent homes, and in most of the country, buying a home is beyond the pocket of the average couple, and that includes two income earners. So this for me starts to tell the tale more graphically. This is what local authorities were doing. And if you just look at what they were doing in that period up until the mid-70s, just look at the mass of green, look at the numbers. If you add up each year, how many are being built. A year when 200,000 affordable rent homes were built, over a period of over 30 years, when on average, over 100,000 were built. That was 3 million social rent homes. And then since then, even though we're supposed to be a rich and powerful and caring country, housing has never got onto the agenda. So even though the Attlee government was just beset by problems, lack of money after the war, and yet housing became effectively a central thread, which was then, because of its importance, carried over by the follow-up governments. Come Mrs. Thatcher. Some of us are old enough, some of people that we need to get involved in this don't really figure on it. But there we've got the net gains of the homes, and then since then, with Right to Buy, which has thankfully been significantly brought to an end by the current government, and a change that the Blair government and the Brown government didn't have the focus on, we've actually been losing from that total. And if you look at in terms of how that carries over, we have got a homelessness problem out of all proportion to other countries. Um, uh, Unlike some countries, we do have a local authority obligation, but temporary accommodation is often poor, out of area, and inadequate. But you can just see the scale of the problems that we've got. We have self-inflicted the worst housing crisis of any European country. This isn't a graph, but I think it also tells a story. I've been focusing with Alia Future Homes after my period as a councillor on the people who need support, supported modular home communities as a route to create supportive environments where they support each other, significantly people who'd previously been sleeping rough. But if you just look at this, and I like this iceberg, there's just so much hidden away. And a lot of these don't get entitlement to local authority priority for housing. And there are many people that are just hidden from the statistics. But the statistics are bad. 130,000 English households, 42,000 of them are stuck in out of area, 165,000 at the last count children, separately counted 18 to 25-year-olds, care leavers with nowhere to go. They themselves are homeless or at risk, and in total, out of the temporary accommodation, 43,000 households are in hotels or effectively night-by-night style accommodation. And local authorities are hurt. The total bill to the English authorities, and here I'm giving you English statistics, that doesn't really tell about Wales and Scotland and the fact that if a national government's taking a lead, they have to work with the devolved assemblies. So just look at that third column along. That was the scale of rise in the temporary accommodation net bill to London boroughs between the beginning of 2023, i.e. March to June, through to the same period in 2024. And so we're talking about a damaging cost, I would say unhelpful, but 50 years of neglect. But if we're going to sort it out, we have to build. And so either we build more or this graph is going to get worse. For me, this sums up the failure of Homes England, as well as just the damage caused by taking a complete kibosh of an interpretation of what is affordable. So if you look at what is being built since the end of that government, and again, credit to John Healey and Gordon Brown, between 2008 and 2010, there was a miraculously good 2 years after a poor earlier period. And they actually had an overhang, which the Tories tried to take credit for, including freeing up local authorities to build and to run their own housing account. But if you look at where Homes England, working with housing associations, I'm happy to debate whether housing associations are a good or bad thing. But if you just look at that drainage through shared ownership and the new creation of a higher level rent, which the housing associations have operated to, which is particularly damaging in London and the southeast, we ain't been building affordable. There's a very good report by Crisis, which goes back to 2017, and it predicts, whether it's right or wrong, but it's come up with a model to predict the scale of the tragedy and which parts of the country will suffer most. And number one, and London has benefited from top slicing Homes England funding, and that has been really well used by people like Tom Copley as a deputy mayor to Sadiq Khan. London has been making more effort because it's had more money. But if you just look at the scale of its challenge of lack of housing and the prediction of where homelessness is going, if you look forward, you've got London taking well over half of the homeless challenge by 2036, progressively it getting worse there. But I'm sad to report that we're on this trajectory. So this was predicted back in 2017, and in the mid 2020s, that is where we're heading. So briefly, I'm not normally a harbinger of doom. I like to find ways around it. So if we look, I just think that if you look, yeah, 4 billion spent in 1 year on Help to Buy, generally gap funding being poorly used. Even with the existing or a renewal of the existing funding, there's a huge opportunity for housing associations. Virtually no English local authority was allowed to bid for Homes England funding. Cambridge got a leg up because George Osborne wanted us to support his wonderful ideas for a combined authority. We wouldn't have got that 70 million without some other stray event. But virtually no English council outside London has had any significant money. There are now some exceptions. So where's Homes England going to go? Well, I'm sure that Angela Rayner's heavily involved, and other people with housing skill and knowledge amongst the team of MPs and ministers. There needs to be a focus on affordable and actually building social rent. There needs to be an end to all the giveaways to housing associations because that's just money that has to be used far better. I want to see funding for what I'm going to talk about in the last bit, which is the need to help the worst off. I still don't understand why it hasn't filtered through that we should put homeless people first. And if that means building transitional homes as well as permanent rental homes, then that's essential because at the moment we've got people living in appalling conditions and the numbers have just grown and grown. So 5 matters to me, and I'll be looking out to see what they announce in September or October. They then need to rebuild local authorities. It will take local authorities a bit of time, as it didn't take them long in 1945, but effectively that has to happen again. And the teams that existed until about the late 1970s need to be recreated. They need the capacity. We need to unlock urban sites. I'm really interested in smaller sites because modular gives great potential there. And only Wolverhampton so far has been announced as a sort of trailblazer for a new model. But so that's 4 billion a year. It needs to be used differently. So a little bit about some of what we've been doing, and that is when you take people who are homeless, particularly a lot of single isolated people, they need support as well. And so this for me is why transitional housing has to be taken with far greater importance. It's the same in the case of families. A lot of families that are unable to be independent, they hate that. They hate the fact that they've had to give up a private rental. They've often been kicked out completely unfairly, something that will be addressed. But down in the bottom right hand corner, you've got the Prince and Princess of Wales visiting Eamon, who's going up to Lambeth Palace on the 22nd of September. The church is taking these things more seriously. It's about people rebuilding, but this isn't where they're ending up. These are transitional homes. They're small. I could come back and explain this a bit more. They've been shown to work. There are now about 100 transitional communities for people with significant challenges coming off drugs, coming off drink, coming off a breakdown in their lives. We borrowed quite a lot of our thinking from an outfit called Social Bite, a lovely charity. And there's news today that Scotland's drug problem is still awful. And they work with under 25s. So just a few examples. It isn't boxes. I don't like metal boxes. Bristol now has a major van dweller problem. 2 stories in cities because it's makes such a difference. Cardiff has got some great examples. Here we've got a 3-story with small homes for under 25s that Centrepoint have created in Peckham. It's not the perfect example, but if H&M Prison can put 1,200 modular homes into prisons to help get them out of a rut, it just shows you what you can do in a short space of time. There's me standing in front of 24 that we got together in Chelmsford on a former motel site that charity, homeless charity Chess, so wisely bought. Bristol is, for me, in Britain, the place where 1,000 flowers are blooming. There's just many examples in that city, and it just shows you the speed. Going back to that Chelmsford one, it took 12 months from getting planning application in to building those 24 homes. And that's a charity with a bit of help from the council, but it just shows you what can be done. We like wood. And again, Social Bite, who are up in Scotland, are buying another 30 of these. And it just shows that it need not be a stereotype home. So I've already created a couple of podcasts, but I look forward to listening to myself once more when this one gets put on up on Spotify, The Land of Younger People. And these are 2 other films. On your left, that's a picture of how in parts of the country, like London, you can use meanwhile land. So those didn't last there forever, but they put those up for about 10, 20 years after the war. A couple more links to just a film to show you around one of these modular homes. And briefly in the bottom corner, you've got a very important piece of research. I really like to see research about when people move in. And this is a researcher for modular home communities for former rough sleepers. There are other reports like on the Bristol build. So this guy was an MP. He wasn't obviously too busy because he was also a cartoonist, and he produced a classic image from the 1920s, which I have adapted, because at the moment, people on the lowest incomes are hardly on the ladder at all. And the rest of society hasn't shown enough care. We need to get back to that Bevan leading the post-war house building. It won't take a short time. I'll be lucky if I'm alive before we get on top of some of these problems. It's a 20-year haul. But at last, we have a government that is taking affordable housing seriously.
Yeah, thanks, Lewis. Could you give us some idea of costs? So recent developments, cost per unit?
So if you take this, the cost of the modular homes was a bit over £70,000, and that included everything, like all of the fittings, the shower, the kitchen, right down to the teaspoons. The overall development included some training rooms and community, so it did come in at over £100,000 per home. But it's a 24 home community. So we've got about 3 projects on the go at the moment, and certainly the aim is to get to about 100,000. Where we try and cut a bit of money is to aim to try and get a piece of land. So council garage sites, sometimes church land, actually avoiding a penal cost for the land is pretty crucial. So that's broadly where we are, Andy. In the northeast, the cost to build and the availability of vacant property may make these less competitive, but there's still the charity Emmaus is putting up 16 with Durham County Council. But the key thing is they get their own front door. The way that the local housing allowance works also helps, Andy, because it's a little bit more generous to people who actually have their own front door than to someone
Yeah,
sharing a
yeah, yeah,
house.
yeah.
So it the aim is to try and raise the capital all up front. So everything that the homeless charity or local authority have can then be used to support people. You're talking about people on serious addictions here, spending maybe a year, maybe 2 years, with the aim that almost all of them are able to move on, provided there's a flat to move on to.
One last question from me, and I'll throw it open. So, how long do you hope these homes will be habitable for?
There's a system called BOPAS, where they are certificated to last a minimum of 60, normally a minimum of 70 years. Um, I was looking through the papers in Ipswich, and there was a prefab home built in 1950 for sale for £250,000. And when I looked at the detailed pictures, it didn't look like they'd spent a lot on it. They'd spent a bit on it. So they do need to be built well. Um, these are built by the people who won the contract is Hill, a regional builder in the south and east, and they're 50% owners of a volumetric modular builder over in Shrewsbury. So these are built well, and you have to make sure that that's the case. It doesn't help, and I know some people, not everybody's the greatest fan of modular. I will continue to spread the word and explain the strengths and where you get the best quality. Yeah, as in anything, you've got to look for the right people who are going to build something really well. And I'd prefer to build more in timber than in steel. Um, and so some of the opportunities consist of moving quality timber from Scotland and Wales to build in other parts of the country.
Okay, can I go back on my promise only to ask two questions and ask the third question? So lots of debate about the way that construction's dominated by the five big companies. I'm assuming that modular gives a kind of opportunity to bring the medium-sized companies into the game.
It definitely does, and well, if you look, yeah, and if you did dig in, Andy, to how we built all those homes from 1940 to 1980, small and medium-sized builders were a very big part of that. Um, uh, so, so I think one of the ways that local authorities can make a big difference is by effectively opening up opportunities of pieces of land. And I'm not. I'm not so dominated in my brain by modular that I don't think that traditional isn't as good. So I do think that I would want to see in Homes England's way of apportioning money to basically get off what they were on before. They literally favoured those big six builders over the rest, um, as well as favouring handing out money as ineffective supposed subsidies to reduce the cost of the market home. So I think, yeah, the smaller builders have got a big part to play. With modular, yeah, if you look at the cost of that build, a third of it on the right site is going to be done by local groundworks contractors, local other contractors. So you've got a partnership between whoever's building the modular homes, which can be built in different places. The industry's got a term, flying factories, where you can literally say make the panels in a factory and then you can assemble them with local people. Um, there's a large amount of labours provided by a whole range of people that wouldn't otherwise get a job. Um, this is an opportunity for training. Ex-prisoners are employed in Peterborough and in Gloucestershire and in other places in the factories building modular. Bit ironic given that in Birmingham they're building modular homes for prisons. Um, but you've got a whole opportunity to bring people in and train people as well as work with smaller companies.
Thanks. Des, Lewis would have been so focused on his presentation that he wouldn't have seen your comments in the chat. Do you want to just jump in with that?
Sorry, Des.
No, don't apologise. In fact, I'm going to apologise. I didn't mean to send that out quite so soon. I was messing about with it, and I'd already deleted half of it because it didn't fit, and accidentally posted it. I was just reading it through. It mostly makes sense anyway, but I just feel like why has it taken me so long to find this group? I've been campaigning away down in the deep southwest, starting at a regional conference about 5 or 6 years ago, presenting motions on wanting to see prefabs, as we called them when I was a kid. I was surrounded by prefabs. I grew up near Heathrow Airport, and there was owner-occupied housing, but most of it was prefabricated, mostly built by the local council, but also the airport built loads and loads of houses. And it just seemed to me, well, why aren't we doing it? Because I understand a lot of what you've said there about the history of it, and of course the Tories, it's all been about vested interests for them, hasn't it? And they don't give a, do they, about especially people on very low income. But the Labour Party do, and a Co-op Party do. I'm in the Co-op Party as well. I'm chair of Exeter and Devon Cooperative Party. But this is a real opportunity, and the thing is that the traditional builders haven't got enough brickies, have they? They're not going to be able to build 1.5 million houses in the time allocated, and these prefabricated houses are fantastic. And we've got a few down in the southwest. Exeter have done a pretty good job.
They've done a good job.
And the passive house designs are just amazing. It's people screaming for green technology to save on their electricity and all the rest of it. And it can be done. And what I hadn't realised, and this is what I keep finding out more, and this is what I was saying, I'm excited to be here tonight. It's my first meeting with this group, is that you've been on it for years. And what we need to do is just scale it up, don't we? We need hundreds and hundreds more of the companies. That's what a lot of the government's money should be doing, is investing in the manufacturing of. And then
Homes England made a mistake. They took financial stakes. I don't know why, but they blew a lot of public money by putting money at risk.
Yes.
But the prefabs were greatly loved. When I was a councillor in the 80s, I was talking to people who were still living in them, and don't take my prefab away from me, please. And they'd been there; they'd grown up in them. One of the routes that there's many layers to this, but I do, and there are people within Homes England who've written a strategy on sort of what they call modern methods of construction, which is any way of sort of bringing this together quickly. You don't want to do things too quick, but there is this advantage that if the government was in a position to front load the use of some of the 49 billion, and they put a chunk into to get basically just getting people out of hotels. I'm not trying to mimic what the
I know,
doing on migrants, but give people a better place to live. In Ireland, they've similarly had a big fuss created by people who've been quite xenophobic, I'll put it that way, because what the Irish did, I thought, Des, which I think could work in Britain, is the Irish got a well, they didn't have a consortium, but they've got a framework contract of which 5 different Irish companies qualified, and they had to build, I think, about 4,000 homes primarily for Ukrainian refugees, and these are good homes that they've spec'd. They didn't tell them exactly how to build them, but they created a framework which said, if you can tool up and do this to our standards, then you actually help companies. You might have some smaller ones in there as well. So you're effectively saying that there's a program, but you have to build to our quality. You can vary it, but it is there is a way. There's just like, and he was a living miracle, was Aaron Bevan. He put his head behind this, and because he did so much on the NHS, he didn't get the credit that he deserved for getting the prefab program going. And if I'm not, it's only part of the solution, but it can make a real difference in a decade. And
it can be a big part. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a big part. And if you look inside these homes, yes, it's compact, but I think these were 30 square meters for one person. If you go up and say if you can build a 3-bedroom home with sort of 2 or 3 of these, and as a result, you can do what's happened in Cardiff. They've done it. They've got about 150 on one gasworks site and about 300 transitional homes, which means people don't have to live in crappy home rooms, often outside the area where their kids go to school.
Lewis, I've got John Lynch who wants to ask a question.
Oh, hello, Lewis. Thank you. The site, what you've got on screen at the moment, what's the logistics?
The logistics of this?
Yeah, travelling, as well. People getting to and from there.
So in terms of the logistics of the build, it was a former motel, and a lot of work was done, and then literally in the period of 3 or 4 days, 24 homes came on the back of a whole series of lorries. You've got 2 stories, so you've got quite a bit of work to do to pull it together. Look at the back. They're really lucky to have a wonderful wood at the back. So you essentially what you do, John, is you've got the bedrooms at the back, which is nice and peaceful and quiet, and then you've got a more social space. The other locations we would normally create a garden and a veranda, so you've got social space, and it's not quite as boxy as this. But so that's the logistics in terms of the build. In terms of the people, there's quite a care taken in selecting people, but giving them tenancy rights. You're talking about quite a few troubled people who are coming off crack cocaine or alcohol problems. They're very isolated. Sometimes their life's broken down. But the aim from the charity is, as I mentioned briefly, was that it could be 6 months, but it's more likely to be a minimum of a year. It could be 2 or 3 years. They're not aiming to be permanent. But then when people do move on and get a 1-bed flat, that frees it up, John, for somebody else. So the human part of it is really important.
Yeah. What about getting to and from there? Are you very near to Chelmsford?
What, in terms of transport, getting in and out?
Public transport.
It's not perfect, but there is a bus runs past. They did manage to get people to give them some electric bikes, and there will be a minibus that will go in and out. At the moment, London creates half of Chelmsford's homeless problem by sending quite a lot of people from London to Chelmsford. Chelmsford's previously been sending people to Ipswich. It's all bonkers. But it is still tough in much of the southeast of England to organise flats. The benefit of them being on this site for a while is if they've had trauma or different problems, it gives them a chance to rebuild. In the case of the Cambridge 4 communities now, 15 people have moved on to a flat of their own over the last 4 years. So people do need the support, and and we had under the Tories until lockdown, rough sleeping going up and up and up in cities, particularly in London. It's still bad in London. But we've just got to find alternatives for people.
Okay. Can I just ask us what you said as well, Lewis? They're transported there. Someone approached me years ago, about 8 years ago, and they was talking about Germany has a factory or several factories, what builds them and ships them to England. I mean, for a while, hasn't it?
Well, I've been a double act with a guy who by chance had he'd done a master's about modular housing, and he knew a lot of the building better than me. So Germany does have that. They do build a lot more modular. This is a firm, Lywood in Munich, but essentially, and I've got a Norwegian company wants to get into the country and build and transport over. And it may be from countries that have got a better wood supply that is good, but it costs a lot, John, to shift them. So the only way that really companies could turn a bob and work in other countries as if they were to make them as panels and to then get them shipped and then build them locally. And if we've got projects we've been talking to in the Isle of Man and in Guernsey. In the Isle of Man, you've got to use local labour to build. So in a way, you do want to create the local jobs as well. But to build something that's going to last 60 or 80 years, each of these could be moved if you had to move them. So a bit like the prefabs on that picture or painting of South London. They're actually designed in a way so that if you did have to move them from a site, you can.
Oh, just one more thing. Could you always put other units on top, go up to a third floor?
With some of them, you wouldn't even put two-story. These are very strong metal, so you can do 3 stories with these. If people dig into London, one of the areas people have made money out of modular is near Heathrow again. If I don't know, Des, if you're still in that area, but
no, I live in Devon now.
All right. Sorry, you did say.
That's
well,
all right.
You won't know that in sort of Hammersmith and near Heathrow, and also Croydon's another example. Croydon's got 2 tower blocks, 22-story and 28-story, and they're fundamentally modular homes, but with a concrete frame. So I don't think that would go down too well in Devon. But in the southwest, it's a good example where you've got there are different firms. I mean, I'd be happy to, rather than give people a tour of my hometown of Cambridge, which is pretty, I'd be happy to give tours of Bristol just to show exactly the quality of some of the modular. And yeah, Devon's got the Devon Housing Commission is interested in it. Cornwall has bought a lot of these. So in Truro and Padstow and St Ives, they've been particularly focused on single people who are homeless. So I think in this, and you've got van dwellers. So Bristol's got a van dweller problem now, but there are all sorts of people who are just under the radar in terms of being homeless. You have got extraordinarily good Labour councils in Plymouth and Exeter, but
absolutely,
a lot can happen. So.
Thank you, Lewis. That's brilliant.
Yeah, Bob and
so
Will.
By this.
Yeah, but Bob and Will, I wondered if you got any observations, questions you wanted to share with us.
I don't actually, but I've been very much enjoying the conversation so far.
Okay, that's brilliant, Bob. No, it doesn't look as if Bob's.
No.
Oh yeah, Bob. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the idea that that this is some kind of extraordinary innovative approach. As you said, Lewis, back in the 70s and 80s, the GLC produced almost 10,000 of these, not the post-war ones, but in order to handle the estate improvement program. They were all decant accommodation, 2 beds and 3 beds. The 2 beds were the rectangular ones, the 3 beds were the L-shaped ones. When I was the Deputy Director of Housing in Hackney in the 70s and 80s, we used about 500 of these in our own estate improvement program. And I think it's a pity that they disappeared, because though you've identified a particular and very important use for them, there's a much wider application. We've got such a terrible problem with the existing housing stock, which needs major works, that a lot of that would be easier if people were able to be decanted into the neighborhood or the street. You can't always do what the GLC did with its 4-day packages and, send everybody to the coast one day in the 4 days when they did all the plumbing. But I think this is fantastic stuff. And it's a pity that it's not more widely appreciated.
Yeah, well, I was a GLC councillor from 1980 to 86, so I missed the glory days of a build program that had gone back to the LCC as well as to the 73 to 77 group. But yeah, I mean, if you could use these, as you say, for people to go back to the community they came from, largely in Cambridge. We've built so far 700 council homes, and we've got another 300 with sites. We've given people a real boost, but they've often had to move to a new community and effectively reseed that sort of community spirit simply because there's nowhere to move people from. But I think the problem now, Bob, is that successive governments, and I'm afraid the Blair period was not good, have just let the problem get worse and worse, and the spiraling of the house prices just shows the failure year and decade after period. So look out and see what is going to come up from Homes England. See what is being sort of planned so that Angela's got a good focus on what she wants to happen. This is more money than a Labour government has put into housing, other than a brief effort by Gordon Brown and John Healey, 28 to 10. So people need a space to live, and some of these, if they do stay in here, some of these for 5 years, if it's near where their children go to school or where their support networks are, that it is a serious answer. And I do believe it. If you just look around most cities, if we've just got 5 car park sites off the city council in Cambridge, if you look around just in London in particular, there is land which is not being made into £1 million an acre. There are a lot of small sites, whether it's Exeter, Bristol, Worthing or London, and this can mean that we can build quicker, as well as put to use land which is not already being taken by the big builders. And if people want to do a meeting on this subject more locally, I'm very happy to travel.
Well, just one more very quick question. The other thing that has been proposed is to have some new towns. Maybe wouldn't it be wonderful if they were garden cities? And I mean that's getting a lot of building in an area very quickly, and let's shunt the idea across into that as well. It's what I would ask.
Yeah. Well, it was only a couple of weeks ago that 5 of the particular chosen new towns were identified, and they're fairly geographically spread. There's one in Lancashire, one in the southwest, southeast. So, yeah, Yeah, I think there's definitely the opportunity to build differently. As Bob said about the configurations that have been used in the past, and I just, in terms of volume, I think probably Cardiff is the best, because there's about 300 were built very quickly for families who needed a place. So, and if people want to build with brick, they can.
Yeah.
And you can build really good, and we don't want to have cheap stuff put up. But I mean, a bit like Trump and his drill. We just use the build word.
Yep. Yeah.
I think it's important to, as you say, Lewis, to scrutinise what the 39 billion is actually going to be used for. The thing that puzzles me is that back in the year 2000, we had about 4 million and a bit social housing, not social rented housing, but across the board. We've got slightly less than that now. And in between times, housing associations and councils have utilised 90 billion of capital and 300 billion of housing benefit. To what end? To what end? You know, it's crazy. And, you know, this year, housing associations and councils are going to trouser 23 billion in housing benefit and unified credit. And private landlords are going to pocket 10 billion. And private landlords, nobody insists on standards for private rented housing. And yet we're shoveling taxpayers' money into private landlords' pockets. I can't fathom it out. It drives me mad.
Yeah.
Well, John Healey did a lot of work which said, look, you've got to build because of just how much is being wasted with housing benefit. And he literally did produce a couple of reports which showed how you did it differently. I don't want to be mean to housing associations, but I think they have been living off the hog without taking homeless people seriously, which is why my voice is for those people that are forced to live in hotel rooms, and which does involve a bit of effort on the transitional front. So we will see. If Labour gets conned by some of the housing associations to do, if you remember that graph piece where it just showed the gap that what they called affordable, no one in many parts of the South London and the Southeast could afford. So I'm hopeful. I've got, obviously, like many people, there's good and bad about it. We have got a Labour government. They are committed to this. I want to be clapping, even if it's looking at the TV when Angela Rayner gets up in Liverpool.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, have you spoken to Andrew about this?
No, we did contact Rishanara Ali and talked about the chess thing, because she at that stage was the homelessness minister. We're looking forward to a new appointment. So, and I think
she'd like it. I can't see how she wouldn't.
No. She's been there.
Exactly.
She knows the issues. She's got a level of commitment that most ministers never have. We suffered Tories that never wanted even to do the job that they were being paid for. Angela is definitely committed, and I've got a lot of faith. What I want to see is this focus on including people who are desperate for a place to live.
No, I think it's great.
And some of the rediscovering, Bob, some of what was done before. So yeah, we'll see what the focus is. It will take time for some councils to rebuild. I'm not expecting rush decisions from Homes England. They are turning things around. They've appointed one of the brightest people from the prisons section of the Home Office to be their new chief executive. Personally, I'm not great on civil servants who have never become really, really professional, but they have got a really able leader and someone who could start to think things fresh. The housing associations don't need to build if they're not going to build stuff. Probably my biggest point on that, Des, would be only give money to housing associations that are actually tackling homelessness.
Yeah, great idea.
Okay, can I give a collective thanks to everybody? We
Yep.
brought this in just under an hour, which is absolutely unique for us. And you've asked some great questions and had a great debate that will work really well on the podcast. So thanks to everyone who's come along tonight, but particularly you, Lewis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks to you. And I mean, one of the things that keeps the red flag flying is the Labour Housing Group. So, I mean, it's been working through thin periods, and I hope you get the rewards that you deserve for all the efforts that your people have put in over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, thanks for the plug. All right. Okay. Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.